What do you think? Is the worst car of the 90s? A immobile box? An egg that knows how to roll? Or something that's neither fast nor convenient, and even makes people feel embarrassed when driving it? Today we will step into the disaster archive of the automobile industry, where each car is a costly lesson for both the designer and the buyer. But hold on, don't scroll past just yet, because the final car may make you laugh, cry, and just sigh helplessly. Number 12, 1995, BMW 318G. When we think of BMW, we immediately think of top-notch driving experience, luxury, and sportiness. But in 1995, the German automaker made a strange decision to create a cheap hatchback to attract young people. And so, the 318G was born, with a design that looked like it had its rear chopped off, an underwhelming one. 8L engine, and instead of the modern multi-link suspension from the E36, they installed the outdated A-arm system from the E30. Can you imagine it? A BMW that couldn't even keep up with a regular Dodge Neon. And yet, the price was double. Driving experience? The front and rear felt like they were from two different cars. The design was so short, it looked like it had been cut with a chainsaw. In just 4 years, with a mere 25,000 units sold, the 318G not only failed in sales, but also became the perfect example of the question cheap. But is it worth it? And for BMW, the answer is absolutely not. Number 11, 1995, Chevrolet Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo used to be an icon, a muscle coupe, deeply American, associated with the racetrack and rugged drivers. But in 1995, Chevrolet decided to revive that legendary name by slapping it onto a two-door Lumina. And what was the result? A reputation-damaging blow like never before. The new Monte Carlo had no personality, no sporty character, and no sense of luxury. It looked like a lifeless, round plastic blob, no different from a rental car at the airport. From Maine to Oregon, mullet-wearing men tossed away their half-smoked Winston cigarettes and cried out in despair. Even the Z34 high-performance model couldn't save that boring image. People once drove the Monte Carlo with pride, but the 1995 model? It only made classic car enthusiasts turn away in shame. Perhaps the best thing the Monte Carlo ever did was cease production. Number 10, 1991, Toyota Previa. In the 90s, Toyota nearly dominated the entire passenger car segment in the US. But when they entered the minivan battle, they launched a running egg called the Previa. It may sound cute, but the reality is, no one could love it. The Previa had a shape like a pregnant balloon fish. It was expensive, and its engine was incredibly weak, only using a 4-cylinder engine, making the odd version take 13.6 seconds to reach 100 km/h. While competitors were using powerful V6 engines, Toyota stubbornly stuck with a mid-engine layout, an extremely difficult configuration to upgrade. Toyota tried to patch it up by adding a supercharger. The result? It was a bit faster, but sounded like a blender. The issue was, Americans needed something practical, not a Japanese-style engineering puzzle. Eventually, Toyota gave up on its unique philosophy and chose something simpler, copying Chrysler to create the Sienna. And this time, they got it right. Number 9, 1996, Nissan 200SX. There was a time when the Sentra CR 1991-1994 was considered an underground legend among car enthusiasts. Light, powerful, fun to drive, and affordable. But who would have guessed? Just a few years later, Nissan decided to replace it with the 20SX. And this was the moment. The legacy was destroyed. It still had the same old engine, but the 200SX was heavier, weaker, and handled worse. The independent rear suspension was replaced with cheap torsion beams. The body was bloated and soft, leaving performance enthusiasts thoroughly disappointed. And the driving experience? Flimsy, with the familiar excuse, increased comfort, the most dreaded phrase in the car industry. It may sound good, but when you take it for a test drive, that feeling is no different from driving a Sentra that had lost its soul. It not only made people forget about the CR, but also diminished the value of the same name for years to come. Number 8. 1995 Chevrolet Cavalier. In the 80s, the Cavalier was the shining star of the affordable car segment, simple, economical, and accessible. But by the mid-90s, Chevrolet released the new generation of the Cavalier, and when you looked at it, everyone thought it was just the old version. With a new shell, the 1995 Cavalier still used the outdated platform. The engine was noisy, the interior was cheap plastic, and the driving experience? It felt like rowing a boat. The sedan version was bulky, the convertible version was loose, and the coupe version was considered the least ugly. Meanwhile, competitors like the Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla were becoming more refined, durable, and modern, while the Cavalier seemed like an old man out of place. Among high school students, Chevy kept pushing the Cavalier for a decade, nearly unchanged. And the result? A terrible safety rating, followed by an ending that no one regretted in 2005. Number 7. 1993 Volkswagen Eurovan. Volkswagen was once the trailblazer for the minivan concept in the US with the legendary VW bus. But by 1993, they came back with a bold statement. And the product they brought was the Eurovan. Sounds European? Luxurious? Not at all. This was actually a light truck disguised as a minivan, with a design that was big, heavy, and as weak as a sick cat. The 2.5L 5-cylinder engine only produced 109 horsepower, almost hopeless, for a vehicle weighing nearly 2 tons. People thought the Eurovan would bring a nostalgic feel for the new generation of hippies, but the reality was slow, heavy to drive, hard to park, and burn gas like an SUV. Americans, now grown up with children, didn't need a quirky vehicle. They needed something practical, with enough towing power. The result? The Eurovan sold so poorly that Volkswagen had to withdraw after just 1 year. And even when it returned later, it never regained its footing. Number 6. 1995 Honda Odyssey. Honda is often seen as the king of logic. Everything they do makes sense. But in 1995, they released their first minivan, and strangely enough, they decided not to use sliding doors. That's right, a minivan, but with sedan-style opening doors. The first-generation Odyssey looked like a stretched Accord. The interior was more cramped than its competitors, and there were almost no standout features. While parents needed a practical, spacious, powerful vehicle, the Odyssey fell flat. Even worse, it was launched right when Chrysler unveiled their new generation of minivans, bigger, better, and crushing it in every way. The result? Disastrous sales for the Odyssey, with a 1:25 ratio. Honda even dumped the leftover stock to Isuzu, renaming it the Oasis, but no one cared. And in the end, the first-generation Odyssey is only remembered as proof that even Honda can get it wrong. Number 5. 1998 Daewoo Lanos, Nubira, and Leganza. In the late 90s, Daewoo looked at Hyundai and Kia, seeing their success in the US and thought, we can do this too. But instead of starting slowly, methodically, and securely, they threw 3 car models into the market at once: the subcompact Lanos, compact Nubira, and midsize Leganza. Confused by the names already? Hold on. The story gets even stranger. Daewoo didn't open dealerships, but recruited college students to sell cars to each other. And what about the cars? The interiors were as cheap as a bus station bathroom. The design? Mediocre. The engine? Weak. The driving experience? You'd rather walk. The climax? The salespeople sued Daewoo after discovering that internal discounts were reported to the IRS as taxable income. No joke. And the ending, as you can imagine, Daewoo went bankrupt. GM scooped up the remains, rebranding them as the Suzuki, Reno, Forenza, and Verona, and continued to haunt American drivers for a few more years. Number 4. 1991 Saturn S-Series. Saturn was heavily promoted by General Motors as a different kind of car company with its own factory, dealerships, and unique products. and was expected to be GM's savior during a tough period. But in reality, Saturn was just GM in miniature, with all the same inherent weaknesses. The series, launched in 1991, looked different, that's true, but it still had the familiar front-wheel drive. The engine was noisy. The interior? Cheap. The build quality? Just okay. And the driving experience? No different from the other mediocre GM cars of that era. They promised that the plastic body would allow for easy design changes over time. But in the end, no one changed anything because all the money was spent on building the company from scratch. $5 billion gone just to create a car line that consumers didn't even bother to remember the name of. And the series? It serves as a reminder that different doesn't always mean better, especially when you keep all the old mistakes. Number 3, 1990, GM Dustbuster minivans. Have you ever heard about how 2 giant Japanese companies failed when trying to compete with Chrysler's minivans? Well, do you think GM could do better? These might be the most controversial minivans of the 90s, not because of technology, not because of the price, but because of their bizarre shape. The Chevrolet Lumina APV, Pontiac Trans Sport, and Oldsmobile Silhouette, 3 GM models, were called Dustbusters because they looked exactly like gas-powered handheld vacuum cleaners. In theory, GM wanted to create the minivan of the future, but in reality, users saw a long, awkward nose, strange interior, a dashboard that stretched like an airport runway, and a 3.1L V6 engine that was painfully underpowered. The driving experience? Vague. The visibility? Unpleasant. Parking? A nightmare. Although GM later tried to upgrade, a more powerful engine, a shortened nose design, and a revised dashboard, it was too late. Americans chose Chrysler, and GM realized that the future doesn't come from a weird shape. Number 2, 1990, Yugo Cabrio. You might think this entry is a bit unfair, especially since we already trashed the Yugo hatchback in the worst cars of the 1980s list. But wait, because by 1990, the Zastava company decided to take this pain to a whole new level, the Yugo Cabrio, the cheapest convertible in America, and probably the worst in history. Instead of keeping the simple, manually folding soft top, they attached an electric hydraulic opening-closing mechanism. Completely unnecessary for a car already infamous for breaking down constantly. And it didn't stop there. While the hardtop version finally got electronic fuel injection, the Cabrio stuck to the outdated carburetor, suffocating, hard to adjust, and full of hassle. Why? It seems like Zastava just wanted to send the message, "Hey America, you like the sun? Well, enjoy the misery." The result? Less than 100 units sold, and when Yugo went bankrupt in 1992, no one seemed to care. Compared to it, the Geo Metro convertible suddenly felt as luxurious as a Bentley. Number 1, 1996, Suzuki X90. More than a quarter of a century has passed since we first scratched our heads, trying to understand what the heck is the Suzuki X90? It's part SUV, part coupe, part convertible, and yet it didn't do any of those things well. The Suzuki X90, such an odd hybrid that, after more than 25 years, we still haven't received any explanation about what it was even supposed to be. Based on the Suzuki Sidekick, the X90 looked like a toy that a child put together with the wrong parts. 2 seats, a tiny trunk, just enough space to store, the removable T-top. It had a sedan-like low ground clearance, but with 4-wheel drive just for show. The interior? Cheap plastic from head to toe. The color scheme? Like a box of crayons that just got vomited on. The exterior? Not much better. Round, bulky, like a broken Pokemon. Suzuki even scared the car market with flashy red and yellow ads. With the tagline, "What are you looking at?" And the public responded, "A stupid, expensive blob." The result? Only 7,000 units sold over 3 years. And honestly, those 3 years were far too long for the existence of the X90. There's no doubt about it. In a decade full of terrible cars, the Suzuki X90 deserves to be the worst car of the 1990s. Have you ever driven or almost bought any of the cars on this list? Or do you think there's another 90s car that deserves to be on this list? Comment. Below, I read everything. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss any content that touches the hearts of car enthusiasts. I'll be back with the most misunderstood cars, cars you'd like to forget, and even legends that were unfairly underrated. Thank you for watching until the very end. See you in the next video.